morning, world. This is Steve Rao, the host of Pod of Roku TV's World Edition. I'll greet you live remotely. Sorry, I'm still in my t-shirt today. It ain't about how hard you get hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. Well, I'm here for some business meetings in Northern Virginia. I'll be coming back to North Carolina, but today the focus is on the Mark Robinson fiasco. All eyes are on North Carolina. As I would say, it's like the Titanic hitting an iceberg and submerging every minute we speak. As of today, almost every advisor to the Robinson campaign has resigned. The lieutenant governor made a meteoric rise to be the nominee of the Republican Party for governor of North Carolina. We knew about his controversial statements about having a woman not lifting up her skirt. That's why she was getting abortions. Sometimes we need a good killing. Saying things controversial, off the cuff, off script, disastrous, and a completely Trump-backed candidate. But in the last 48 hours, it was surfaced that the lieutenant governor had posted on a porn site the fact that he was proud of being a black Nazi, the fact that he thought slavery could come back, and it has been documented that these are his statements, although he continues to deny them. This has actually done disastrous things for North Carolina's Republicans. President Trump has distanced himself from Robinson when he came to Wilmington, North Carolina. He was not able to attend the event, or was not asked to attend. And more Republicans have been calling for his resignation. But the deadline has passed, and so his name will be on the ballot. Now, yesterday on CNN, Josh Stein, the leading candidate for governor, the Attorney General of North Carolina, said they will continue to run a campaign, but he's now reaching the double digits. And people think that this is not only going to be a landslide election in North Carolina, giving Stein a huge mandate, but yes, there are pundits saying that this could cost Trump the presidency. As recently as yesterday, he said that if he were to lose, he would not run again, which is weird that he would say that, and that he would not contest the results of the election. I think it's fair to say that this disaster has put us within the reach of the White House, that the Democrats do believe, as of this morning, that Kamala Harris can win North Carolina. And if she wins North Carolina, she will become the first female president of the United States and a presidential nominee that has catapulted herself to a position, a winning position. The ball is in her hand to take it in the end zone. And it's all because of the Republicans' nomination of Mark Robinson. Everybody is asking, how could the Republican Party stand by this candidate? How could they allow a guy to win this nomination when all these things were in his sordid past? And now they're basically handing Stein the governorship and Kamala Harris the presidency. We're going to talk about that in addition to some disruption in the Middle East, as there's been some attacks. We're going to talk about that. But we got to focus on this for the first few minutes while I'm on the show. All eyes on North Carolina, all eyes on Robinson. This is a disaster for the Republicans. I do believe that this is the death knell for Donald Trump, and I do believe that he will lose this election because of this. Mark, come on in.
Oh, hello. I'm not Mark. But,
well, yeah, this has just been a disastrous in North Carolina. And yeah. I mean, it's just, I think Harris is going to win. I mean, I think that we're looking at Democratic landslides across the ticket. They're now saying that the Council of State could be all Democrats except for one. Guess I made a mistake not running for Commissioner of Labor, probably would have won. It's just, I don't see what they're going to do at this point. Shaquille Latimer, who said Mark Robinson was a good guy. Well, Shaquille, looks like your guy's costing Trump the presidency.
All right, so I don't trust polls, but I look at polls, and there's been only one poll out since the revelations, the latest stuff about Robinson. That's New York Times Siena, which leans conservative. But even New York Times Siena has him. No, if you look at the polls, polls. But anyway, they have him down by 10 and 11.
But I think in this case, Stein will carry it through. Now, Stein's going to go double digit, and there's going to be a down ballot effect. And so Let me just tell you, I've spoken to 20 Republicans, and every single one of them says now they're voting for Harris and they're voting for Stein. And these are diehard Trump Republicans. So what they're telling me is that they can no longer trust Donald Trump to be the president if he's going to make decisions of backing a guy like Mark Robinson. So I think that the whole race has shifted now. Now I think Harris is in a position to win this race.
So I think, let me just, one more poll thing.
You called him back, buddy. Good thing we're not playing poker.
So
no one to hold him. No, he's just smiling.
All right, but we may still be in Hillary territory where there's absolutely no way that Trump can win the popular vote. He's never been able to for the 8-9 years since he announced.
All they have to do is win North Carolina, and they win.
Okay,
now they give us a one-state race now. That's what.
Well, I don't think that's quite accurate. But let's just break down a few things. So, as I understand it, Mark Robinson is denying these claims. It certainly doesn't look good. It doesn't look good at all. And with some of his top staffers resigning over the weekend and earlier today, Mark Robinson's candidacy for governor doesn't look particularly promising. However, does that equate to North Carolina voting for the Democrats or voting for Harris-Walz in the presidential campaign? Well, it certainly will hurt Trump. But I'm not sure that even if North Carolina flipped, I'm not sure that would necessarily mean that the race is over. And I'll tell you why. A lot of the poll numbers at the moment show that Harris is in the lead in the Rust Belt states. A lot of the polls are showing that Donald Trump's in the lead. How do you know? Now, the betting market certainly has her ahead, but I think that there is still a lack of substance to her policies. I don't think people really feel as though she's gotten out and said enough. I don't think that her Oprah interview went down that well amongst moderate people. So with all that being said, I still actually think that Virginia, that there's a shot at flipping Virginia. I think that there are some good numbers for the Republicans. So if Georgia was to go back to the Republicans and North Carolina flipped to the Democrats, well, that sort of cancels each other out, and then you're back in the same position. So you've still got the three swing states. You've got Nevada and Arizona. I think Arizona is likely to come back. I think Nevada is probably going to come back. So the interesting thing will be whether any other states other than those 7 states actually flip. And I think that there's a chance of Republicans flipping places like New Hampshire. I'm not sure which states other than North Carolina the Dems can flip. So I'm not sure the race is over. And also the comment about Donald Trump backing Mark Robinson, what's he going to do? Mark Robinson's the Republican candidate for North Carolina, so what can he do?
He called him the MLK of our times, and this guy's a criminal. He has no business running for governor. I tell you, I'm going to go on a limb here and say that anyone that still supports Mark Robinson, you're out. I don't have a problem with someone being a Republican, but to run for the state's highest office with these kinds of scandals and these kinds of things is ludicrous.
Okay, hang on. Hold on.
Why would Trump support him?
Hold up a minute. Mark Robinson was the lieutenant governor already, right?
Yeah.
So it's not like he ran.
Was he? I don't know.
Hang on. It's not like he ran, and there was, he ran, and then there was scandals, and he ran anyway. He was running, and then these scandals have come out. And what are we talking about? We're talking about comments that he's allegedly made on an internet forum. Or on a porn forum or something 10 years ago. And some of the comments are stupid. Like he made some sort of comment about peeping on girls in the shower when he was 14. Well, whether that's true or not, he was 14, who cares? But, and some of the other criticism he gets with comments about the trans community and stuff like that, I don't think that people dislike those comments as much as you guys dislike the comments. But, some of the other things he said, calling himself a black Nazi and then saying that he'd prefer, I think he said something along the lines of, I'll take Hitler over the bullshit that we've got in Washington or something like that. Well, yeah, that's a bit extreme. However, you've been calling Donald Trump Hitler for 10 years. So I don't know what the context of all these comments are. But yeah, you're right. It doesn't look good for his candidacy. And I think the North Carolina Republicans are going to have some problems after this.
So also,
Hey,
Trump is
Shaquille and
not-
Steve,
hold
just
on,
really
hold on.
quickly.
I'll be back in a second. I'm still here, though.
So Trump has not been campaigning hard. Harris has out fundraised him 4-1 in the last month, and he's not canvassing as much, not as many door knockers. He's not hitting the swing states as hard as Harris is. But yeah, the polls are still not convincingly in her favor. At this point, with about 6 weeks to go in 2020, Biden in the aggregate of polls had a 7% lead. Harris has a 3% lead. Now this is, averaged across the whole country. So, and Clinton in 2016 had a 5% lead. Of course, she took the hit when James Comey, but thankfully we're not out of Hillary Clinton territory yet, where you win the popular vote, but you lose the electoral.
But I'm telling you,
let's just focus on that. Let's just focus on that just for a minute, because I'll just say a couple things. So, firstly, 3% popular vote lead for a Democrat. Still, generally, that's still going to be, because of the Electoral College, that's still going to be a Republican win under most pathways to 270. So that's problematic. As for the popular vote, though, I believe, and it's just, again, my personal opinion from the other side of the world, from people that I've been speaking to, that the turnout for Trump in New York is going to be significantly higher. Now, I'm not sure why you're saying that he hasn't been campaigning in the swing states, because he certainly has, and he's had some pretty big rallies there. And I think it was a good move for him to have some of the campaign events that he's had in New York, because the media in New York bleeds into Virginia, bleeds into Pennsylvania, and some of the other surrounding states. So, New Jersey, although, under Biden, I would have said that New Jersey was going to flip. At the moment, I'm not so sure. But yeah, I wouldn't be comfortable just yet if I was a Democrat. And as I said, I think as you get closer to that election, but early voting's already commenced. But when you get closer to the election, I think that the lack of substance of some of the claims or some of the things that she's proposed is going to be worrisome. The other thing that's very interesting is that Dems have spent since 2018, 19, they've been talking about police and justice and things like that. Well, now the Republicans have kind of flipped this around, because Donald Trump can say, well, look, I think that we need to have justice reform because I can see how much the justice system can be corrupted, and I want to make sure that I do something about it. And what's Harris doing? Harris is going out there saying, I'm a prosecutor. I was going to shoot you. If you break into my house, I'm going to shoot you. Well, that's sort of what Democrats have been saying you can't do. So I think it's problematic.
Hey, Shaquille and everybody else, what do you think about the Oprah Love Fest? Because that's all that was an Oprah Love Fest with the whole interview with Kamala Harris, and that's where that quote came from and everything. But what do you think of that? Because it was basically her supporters, whether it was cat ladies for Kamala, or whether it was white males for Kamala, or whether it was a number of entertainers, but it was definitely, and I can say that as a Democrat, it was a love fest.
So
Oprah
hasn't had her show on the air in over 12 years. So I'm not sure that the Oprah style carries as much weight as it formerly did. I watched some of it, and I mean, it was okay. But I mean, with everything, obviously, you have to ask, whose vote will this gain? Whose mind will it change? And I don't know.
So the risk, I think, to Harris is that she could lose votes when she goes to things like that. So Donald Trump going to Gutfield show, that I guess kind of works because it plays into his audience. But the problem that Harris has is she's supposed to actually answer some questions and explain to people what's actually going on. And I don't think that she's done that very well. So in the Oprah interview, she was actually asked questions by the audience, and I don't think that she really answered it. And so, a lot of people that I speak to go, well, who cares that Pretty Woman, Julia Roberts, and Chris Rock and all these celebrities are out there, because they don't live in the same world as the rest of us. And she's not answering the questions. And a lot of what she says just doesn't make any sense. They're like pre-scripted lines that don't have any real substantive value to the questions being asked. I think that's going to be a problem. And she's going to have to explain what she wants to do, what her vision for the country is at some point.
Shaquille, there was a proposal that was given out there that I thought was a reasonable proposal. Maybe Dan thinks it's a reasonable proposal, but I don't know that she even answered that question, to your point and everything. Because when the gentleman, and I'm not sure what his relationship to the gunshot victim young lady was and everything, but he proposed this notion because he said that when 9/11 happened, a number of the airports went into basically lockdown mode, and they had metal detectors. And anybody that watched Lean On Me knows that that's something that's been proposed at schools. And he was basically like saying, why don't we do that for all schools? It may be very expensive, but it would eliminate some of the gun violence and everything. And I don't think that she ever answered whether she would be for that or against that and everything. But it seems like a reasonable proposal that somebody that's got two teenage nephews and everything. But and if that's an issue with guns getting into the school, I don't see why you want some security to be there to make sure that the guns don't get in there.
Look, I'm apprehensive about the idea of young people having to go through metal detectors to go to school. Certainly, Milton Friedman, for example, talked about schooling in inner city New York back in the 70s and what the kids had to go through. That sounds horrible. Having said that, look, I come from a country where guns have been largely banned. We've never had a school shooting that I'm aware of in Australia. You guys seem to have one every 5 minutes. So I'd be petrified if I had a child and I was living in America, sending them to school, because that would worry me. I don't know how to solve that issue. I do think that there should be some staff at the school that are properly trained and actually have easy access to a weapon to help. But past that, I don't know. Do you want kids going through metal detectors? And at what age? Do you want 5-year-olds going through them? Do you have enhanced screening like when you go through the TSA? And then where does it stop? The kid's got, an open bottle of water or pop or something, and then they.
Folks, I gotta leave in 8 minutes, but meanwhile, before I do want to talk a little bit about foreign policy as well, because I think that the recent attacks by Israel on Lebanon, Hezbollah's involvement in this conflict is making that region very tense. I did have an opportunity to interview Senator Mark Kelly on Friday in Raleigh, and he was adamant about continuing the support of Ukraine. But I did question him on the foreign policy of the Harris administration, because even with the Iran nuclear deal and things like that, Trump's been a little hard line on that. But before we get to that, I do want to ask Dan Worthington, just kind of like, you're more of a conservative analyst on the show. Would it be fair to say that I think after everything going on, Trump may still win, but I do think that you guys are in a much more dangerous position now, losing the presidency. Is the MAGA movement, has it hurt the Republicans? I don't know. I guess we'll know in 4 weeks, but it just seems to be the Republican Party that I knew of no longer exists.
Well, there's nothing wrong with making America great again. It's like Biden said, "Build back better." He hasn't done anything to build back better. It's like Kamala is an empty wallet. There's nothing of substance there. It's all smoke and mirrors. It's all Barnum Bailey. Which I find ironic, because I thought Trump was Barnum Bailey. He seems to be more of a substantive leader, and taken more seriously as a strong leader than Kamala ever would be, with her cackling laugh and giggling. And it's cute, and we might have our moment of joy. But this is ridiculous. The kinds of things that they're promoting around. Sex changes for kids and prisoners and illegal aliens that are coming in across all that's so stupid and outrageous to most Americans. You know, the risk. So Trump stands, an even chance of winning the election. Half of America is absolutely sick of what's going on. The other half is, I don't understand them because they don't have any common sense. So and that's just my perspective because I'm a conservative, right? Now you're right about the Republican Party. I think the bigger issue, Steve, is the whole stress between the globalist and the non-globalist. And they can be Democrat or Republican. The Republicans who have normally been against Trump have been globalist. We see that. The Democrats have been lockstep against Trump because they got sucked into the globalist agenda a long time ago. The globalist agenda is the single most largest threat, existential threat to democracy, freedom, and our way of life, and in our sovereignty and our way of life. It's part of what the Democrats want. It's a part of what Kamala wants. It's a part of what Biden wanted. Actually, the Bushes wanted it because they were just as corrupt as the rest of them. Trump, being kind of he was a naive businessman going into the first round, right? Tried to take on the CIA and everybody. Stupid. It sets yourself up for these attacks. These attacks constantly. All of those attacks ended up being farces, false flags. I think 9/11 was September 11th, or September 6th, or January 6th, sorry, was a false flag. I think that was set up. I think it's just getting weird in our country.
Let's go to Sasha Starr. Let's go to Sasha Starr. I'm here for about 10 more minutes, but Sasha, sorry we waited for long to get to you. Your insight on Mark Robinson, your insight on Trump and the MAGA movement. You bring an outside perspective being in Canada. What are Canadians saying out there now in terms of looking at these elections we have in about 40 days?
It's hard to say. The Canadians are quite polarized. Many of them are for Trump. Many of them are for Kamala Harris. It's my opinion. I have nothing against Republican Party, and once it will be resurrected, I will support it by all means. But today there is a choice between Democrats, and you can criticize Kamala as much as you want, but she's non-event. She is just represents Democratic Party because they don't have probably nobody better than that. But and it's also kind of a last-minute replacement for Joe Biden, who obviously couldn't do it, and it was demonstrated by the debates with Trump. And Trump.
Your favorite person, Trump. I love him, right?
I don't want to repeat. I don't want to repeat myself. This is
you gotta love him or hate him, right? It's just the way it works.
But it's been established. I mean, he could be a brilliant president, but at the same time, he's obviously con man, convicted fella. You can twice.
Could I say something about this?
Let me go before I forget my points. All right, you said Biden hasn't built anything. Under the infrastructure bill, between 40,000 and 60,000 infrastructure projects have been started across the country. And yeah, not all of them, most of them are still in the beginning stages, but that's tens of thousands of projects. Gender affirming care for people in prisons is nothing new. And if you could get pissed off at it in the 1980s, the 1990s, it's not a Biden initiative. People have been going trans in prisons for decades. And, depending on so it's not a new outrage. And I don't believe in a globalist agenda. I believe that we need to compete in a global economy. The only way for us to stay the world's #1 economic power and leading technological country is to compete with the rest of the world. And that's not being globalist. I want competent, sane government that lets business and technology thrive in the U.S.
You haven't been getting that
Okay,
with Biden.
let me just come. Let me come into just a couple of points. So Steve was talking about, the Republicans, it's not the party they used to be, etc. But yeah, you didn't like the party that used to be around, right? What you've got now is a very interesting situation. I think there's a guy in Minnesota, but don't quote me on that, who is like the head of the Muslim community or something over there, who's just thrown his support behind Donald Trump. You've also had some fairly visible people in the Jewish community either give their support to Trump or at least withdraw their support for Kamala Harris. So that's a very interesting scenario. The other thing that you've got with the Make America Great Again philosophy, shall we call it, is that Donald Trump is appealing to who used to be Democrat voters. He's actually appealing to that working class group. And when the Teamsters didn't give their support to Harris, it's pretty damaging when their internal polling shows that 60% of their membership actually supports Donald Trump. And they said, look, she would have to have a majority to get the endorsement. He needs to have, universal support to get our endorsement. That's still very, very damaging for them. I want to come to a couple of points that Rick made. So firstly, Rick, in relation to transgender care, right, sex change operations or gender affirming care, whatever you want to call it, okay, it's the same thing. Look, I understand that sometimes people need some help, certainly if they've already started that journey. But it's ludicrous to expect most people to accept the tens of thousands, sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars that are spent on these surgeries. And Kamala Harris is saying that prisoners should be able to access it, and that illegal immigrants should be able to access it. I mean, that's absurd. And if I can give you an example of a case up in Connecticut, Dr. Pettit, I think his name is, who had an 11-year-old daughter and a 17-year-old daughter, and two men followed the 11-year-old girl home with her mother, came into the house, killed the mother. They hit him with a bat, but they didn't actually kill him. They thought that they had. So he was immobilized, but he could hear the screams of his daughters as those two men did the vicious things that they did to those two girls. Then they doused them in petrol and set them on fire while they were still alive. And those two girls died.
I've got to run, but I want to just thank everyone for this first 30 minutes. We're going to continue these conversations tomorrow. We will talk about Israel because I think that's really important. I want to get Sasha Starr's perspective as well. That's a very disruptive point. So foreign policy will also play into this. And we often forget that we've got a vice presidential debate coming up in a few weeks between Walz and Vance. That's going to be an important debate. And I do think foreign policy will come into this play a little bit in terms of Republicans saying that we're in a less safe world. You think back to the Iran hostage crisis and how Reagan came in and the hostages were freed. I saw the movie Argo last week on my way back from Kansas City. About 3 times I've seen it about the hostages that got away from the embassy. A real suspenseful movie with Ben Affleck and others about that, how that happened. But the foreign policy could be a factor in this. Are we safer off? The Fed's cutting rates. Is that our prices going to come down? And maybe, Shaquille, you brought up a good point. If North Carolina goes to the Democrats, will there be a surprise in Georgia? Will there be Pennsylvania? I think is another big one. I think she wins North Carolina and Pennsylvania, she's got to 270. So
Pennsylvania is crucial, I think. Without Pennsylvania, her pathways dissipate.
Yeah, she's got Pennsylvania and North Carolina, and with Roy Cooper down here focusing a lot on her in North Carolina, the Attorney General Josh Stein, and of course Governor Shapiro, who's going to be here this weekend back in North Carolina. It's going to be.
Maybe she could have picked Shapiro. If I could just finish the point I was just going to make very quickly though about the transgender stuff. Rick, so these two men, after they killed those girls, their father wanted the death penalty in Connecticut, and it ended up they got it, but it ended up being vacated by the governor. In any case, one of those two men, they're both sentenced, I believe, to life without possibility of parole, or they're on death row, but it's been temporarily frozen or whatever. One of those two men has now decided, or a few years ago decided, hey, I'm actually a woman, and at taxpayers' expense is being given trans, sex change surgeries, or I don't know, the medication, all that sort of stuff, which is enormously expensive. I think that if I was that father, I'd be absolutely horrified. I would be really offended that that's been allowed to happen. And if I understand things correctly, post the changes to that man's body, he will then be able to go into a women's prison. And that's ludicrous. Now, look, these issues may be rare, but they are talked about. I mean, when a candidate comes out and says, hey, I support that, you're going to get some pushback, I think. The other thing is that you said the United States, like all countries, needs to compete internationally. You're absolutely correct. It does. So why would you decide, if you're Kamala Harris, that it'd be a good idea to put the tax rate of corporate taxes back up to 28%? I know it's not as high as it used to be, but it's amongst the highest in the world. I mean, we're complaining in Australia about our rates being 28.5% or 30% for corporations because it doesn't make us particularly competitive. When we've got Asian countries around us, such as Singapore, which is financially fantastic. Now, most of Europe's corporate tax rates sit around the 20% mark or lower. So why would you want to increase your taxes at the same time as you're saying you want to be internationally competitive? These projects that are being started using tax dollars or borrowed money. And when government does these sorts of things are inefficient and they're costly. So I just think that that's the wrong direction for the United States to go in if it wants to improve its profitability and its appeal to international investors.
Shaquille, when you've been let me respond.
So
I was just going to ask Shaquille. Go ahead, Rick.
Okay, so I don't. If a 28% corporate tax rate, which is in line with what it's been historically, but if it's going to drive companies overseas again, then no, I'm not in favor of that. Now, in terms of trans people in prison, there are 1,200 to 1,500 trans people in U.S. prisons out of, I don't know, a couple million prisoners. Only out of the 1,500, only about 1% are housed in are formerly men now imprisoned as women. So 99% of the trans people in prison are stuck being, if they were men, they're still housed in a man's prison, and
which puts them at risk. I get that, right? That puts them at risk, and so you've got to do something with them. Where would be the safest place?
It's a minuscule issue and it's been going on. It's not a Biden thing that all of a sudden under Biden, like these prisoners are getting gender affirming care. No, people have been arguing for gender affirming care for trans people in prisons since at least the 80s, and there have been other appalling cases of like serial killers living comfortably, in life without parole, but living or on death row with boobs. Like I remember in the 80s, there was this serial killer guy now living as a woman with boobs on death row that the prison paid for. But that's what I'm saying. See, Biden policy.
But that's what I'm saying. Kamala Harris has actually said that this is what the policy should be. She's actually said it. She hasn't just said, "Look, it's an issue." Which what she should have done is just said it's an issue for the states to sort out. But she's actually come out in support of this. Now, by doing that, there's a cost factor involved, and it's a bit like when Bernie Sanders was running in 2020, in 2016, I think it was, when he jumped up on stage and started talking about letting felons vote. Right? Now, I actually agree. I think that once you've done your time, you should be able to regain all the rights that you had, right? After a certain period of time has passed, there should be some forgiveness of that, and you should be able to vote. But is that a hill that you want to die on? Like, why would you even talk about something like that
That's
during a
right there.
campaign.
That's right. Why would you talk about it? If she's going to talk about it, she should give the statistics and say it's a tiny freaking problem. Like, she doesn't like talking about Israel, Gaza, because there's no right answer. Because, we can't control Israel. Israel's going to keep doing the stuff it does. Hezbollah and Hamas are going to keep doing the stuff they do. And whatever policy stuff she says, it's going to piss off millions of voters. So she does.
Yes, but you can't just sit back in a campaign, especially this campaign's unusual, right? Like this isn't like the normal way of doing things where the incumbent president says that he's not going to run, and then he says, no, you know what, I'm going to run. I'm the only person that can beat Donald Trump. And you've got the most unpopular VP in modern history. And then all of a sudden he has a terrible debate performance. He stands aside, she comes in, and then she really doesn't give any interviews for a month. She's, she had a reasonable debate performance, although she didn't really answer any of the questions properly. She was just, poking at Trump, which, seemed to work, I guess. But it's unusual. I think that she really did need to sit down with media. I mean, she did the ABC interview, that didn't really enlighten us at all. The Oprah interview didn't enlighten us. So, I think there's some problems there that people are going to respond to. And again, what's happening
a lot about certain policy positions, the idea of growing the middle class with incentives for new businesses and all that. And yeah, she talks about the stuff that she has plans for.
Yeah, but grow the middle class how? She's been asked that question several times, and her answer is, well, I grew up in a middle class family. I mean, to be honest with you, that's like me saying, hey, I really want to do something for Fijian Indians, okay? I know nothing about Fijian Indians, okay? The fact that I am one, but I was born in Australia. I didn't have any other Fijian Indians around me when I was born in 1983 in semi-rural Western Australia. So I cannot be somebody who can relate to that community. She's talking about all this stuff, and then she doesn't give any details. She talks about increasing taxes. The Conservatives were called all sorts of names when they opposed the so-called Inflation Reduction Act, and because they said, hey, this is, the Green New Deal, it's all climate change stuff. And now recently Biden has said, oh, we should have just called it the Climate Act. I mean, you can't have it both ways. And I think that Democrats are out there at the moment. What they are talking about is not something which the everyday person is going to go, yep, I totally agree with that. And just one last thing. Build the middle class up to what? Up to wealthy, so that you can tax them more and take everything that they earn? I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. You either hate the rich or you don't.
I mean,
Shaquille, just really quick.
But when she talks about higher taxes, it's she and Biden no tax increase for people making over $400,000 a year, which is still a lot of money, and the taxes on the super rich. Which her deal on unrealized capital gains starts at people with a net worth of more than 100 million, which is only a few thousand families across the whole country. So she's not talking about tax increases for everybody. She's talking about
okay.
tax.
Rick, let me put a proposition to you. Let's play this, right? Let's say that you earn $5 million a year. Okay, not exorbitantly huge, right? It's a lot of money to most people. It's $100,000 a week, but that's not massive compared to what some corporate CEOs and things like that earn. Say you're on $5 million a year, and you've got a choice between paying 50% of that, which is $50,000 a week, in taxes, or restructuring yourself and moving to another country, or in a way that's going to save you that $50,000 a week. Wouldn't you want to save the 50? So the issue is, it's not just about what you can measure, which is the amount that you potentially can take from the people that have got the money here or there in America. It's also about the people who aren't going to want to come to America in the first place with their ideas, with their business prowess, because they think that they can keep more of their money if they locate somewhere else.
So I don't disagree, but all right. So we can talk about whether people who make $5 million a year really have business prowess, or whether they're well positioned, or who the heck they are. But yeah, if any policy that drives talented people out of the U.S., within reason, I don't agree with. We need to suck up all the talent out of the world and get it to the U.S. Anyway,
you've got to not be punitive and let people
No, I
keep
think-
some more.
But
Okay.
you said that she's going to raise taxes, and I'm saying they've never raised taxes on people who in the middle class, and they're going to continue not to raise taxes. It's only on people who are making, some cutoff of a shit ton of money.
But Rick,
Hold on a
that's
second.
exactly
Shaquille.
the same problem. You've already got this issue now. You're already going after the very rich now. They pay the majority of the taxes in the United States now. And either it's a minuscule amount of people that you're going after, in which case it's a non-issue, in which case you're not going to raise that much, so why bother doing it? Or it is actually a significant issue and it's going to have economic effects. It can't be both. It has to be one or the other.
Yeah, okay, but
Jacoby?
So trying to listen to the arguments on both sides. Right now, the economists say that Donald Trump's plan, his only plan is tariffs. That plan will add more taxes or more financial burden on actual individuals, more so than Kamala Harris's plan. That's not me saying it. That's what the economists have said. So the idea that one either hasn't said a detailed plan is true. Neither one has given a detailed plan. Both have given actual kind of glossed over ideas of what they're going to do. Kamala Harris's direction, based on, again, the economists, they say is better. It will not exacerbate or increase inflation. However, Donald Trump's will, based on the tariffs and the actual the burden placed on the regular families. In terms of rich, $5 million is rich, especially in the U.S. when the average income is $65,000. I know you make $700,000 or whatever you make a day, Shaq, but $5 million is definitely expensive in the U.S. in comparison to, again, your average income, $65,000. Building the middle class up, the majority of people is sitting below $5 million. The majority of people sitting below the $400,000. So when I guess she's talking about building the middle class up, is strengthening their economic wealth. So they're not living paycheck to paycheck as they're doing now, working multiple jobs and so on and so forth. So my question, we've talked about Kamala Harris's plan. What do you think? And I don't want to hear, well, this Kamala Harris. No, I want to hear, what do both you and Dan think about Trump's plan? And let's talk about Trump's plan.
Okay, you want to? I will.
Well, I'm happy to go, but you go first, Dan, because I've been talking a lot this show.
Drill, baby, drill. Right? So, yes, the oil production, oil independence in the United States reduces gas prices, which reduces inflation, cost of transportation of goods, and everything else. I think that's decrease regulations, let free up businesses to be more productive and to be more successful. I mean, all the things that he did before. I mean, here's the problem, you guys. Kamala Harris is an empty suit. She's never.
Let's talk about Trump's plan. Let's talk about. Trump's plan.
But just stop. I'm talking.
I know, but you're going down this Kamala Harris road. You're pivoting away.
Just shut the hell up and let me talk.
No, Dan, and then you started off with a lie. You're drilling and actually creating more energy than we ever have. I just want to hear about Donald Trump's plan right now.
Why don't you shut up and let me talk then?
Let's talk about Donald Trump.
Shut up and let me talk. Trump has proven that making America great is part of making America more productive, creating jobs, bringing in and creating tax policies that keep corporations in the United States and make them more productive. Keep your stupid comments and looks to yourself. It's immature. And you're
I'm asking how. I need a little bit more explanation.
Okay, dumbass.
Let me. Kamala Harris. I'm asking you how.
You're such an argumentative dumbass. You always interrupt, and then you complain when anybody else interrupts you. Jack, you go for it. Because I'm tired
Okay,
of
well, let
listening
me
to
let
them.
me
All right,
let me
Chad, please take it away.
let me be a little
You're
bit more
a
direct.
punk. You're a stupid punk, and you never have any intelligent things.
Thank
to
you
say.
for the compliment.
Let me
Chad,
let me be a little bit more direct on the whole tariff issue.
Thank
So, but when I say direct, it's going to sound like I'm going off in another direction. But just bear with me for a moment. One of the issues that I've brought up, and I've brought this up even when I was a teenager, when I first sort of started reading about economics and started having an interest in it, is that unions generally, they try to improve working conditions, they try to make sure that people get paid enough, that sort of thing, and that is important. However, in a globalized world, what that means is that production costs, if labor is a big part of the production costs, that labor is often offshored by big corporations because it's cheaper. So what do you do to keep jobs within your country? Ultimately, you have to do, in my opinion, one of only a handful of options. One is you give a direct subsidy to companies locally, which means the taxpayers are effectively subsidising the industry to keep it going. Or two, you put punitive tariffs on imported goods. Now, I'm not a fan of tariffs. I've never really liked the idea of tariffs because what it does is it means that if your imports are more expensive, you'll have retaliatory tariffs in return, and then your exports suffer as a result. And then what do? You subsidize your exports. It's not gonna work. So I don't think that Trump's idea of replacing all taxes with tariffs is going to work. I do like the idea of indirect taxation, but more importantly, he's actually appealing to that base of people who feel as though they've been displaced by the globalized economy that we currently live in. And that's not just an issue that's unique to the United States. I think it's all, it's Western countries all over the world that are experiencing the same issue. But what do you do about it? Now, in relation to punitive tariffs against countries that he thinks are trading with the United States unfairly or on unfair terms, look, I think that that's actually reasonable. I think it's reasonable when he goes to the auto workers and says, look, we're going to tell the car manufacturers that if they shut down the factories here and move them to other countries like Mexico, we are going to put a very, very steep tariff on those vehicles and they won't be able to sell them here, because he's trying to encourage more production in the United States. So will that have an inflationary effect? Yeah, it will. Of course it will. But I would suggest that Harris will have more of an inflationary effect than what he will, because she wants to tax more and spend more. What he's doing is not spending more. And that's why I think that his plan will probably be better.
And I agree with you on the tariff portion that selective tariffs are important. However, he's talking about blanket tariffs, and I think that's where we agree that that's a bad thing. I don't want to speak for you, but I think that's where we agree on that part.
Yeah, but just bear in mind that there are a lot of countries out there that have tariffs on US goods, but their goods being sold into the US don't have tariffs on them. So, and look, these sort of things. We have a thing in Australia. We all know that I have quite an extensive wine collection. We have a thing here called the wine equalisation tax. And what it's designed to do is it's designed to make sure that foreign wine being imported into Australia, it doesn't compete with Australian wine. The problem is that because the wine industry in Australia and the United States, for that matter, is quite young in comparison to the old, French wines, things like that. If you want to go and buy a 30-year bottle of wine here in Australia, you might pay $4,000 or $5,000 for that bottle because they're rare here. Now, that same bottle could be €500 in Europe. Bring it into Australia, and all of a sudden you're hit with a $4,500 wine equalisation tax. Doesn't make any sense. This is the problem with tariffs, is that it just distorts market values. But again, what do? If you have absolute free market, free trade, as Milton Friedman talked about, and other libertarian type economists have talked about, you do run the risk of losing manufacturing and production type jobs to overseas. What's Kamala Harris's plan for this? I don't think she's got one. At least Donald Trump is actually recognizing the problem, and he is appealing once again to that very base that used to vote for the Democrats.
So I think in counter to that, I think she does have a plan for that, because they kept some of the selective tariffs that Trump had in 2020. And I think that is exactly what you're talking about in terms of those selective tariffs, pushing it on to different countries and not doing just a blanket tariff situation, which Trump is talking about. I understand what you're saying about trying to speak for the common man and reaching out to those individuals based on, that idea. But it's also a bad thing, and that's not what he's talking about. Just how we just agreed that selective tariffs are good, which is the balance that Kamala Harris and Joe Biden are seeking. But Trump is going with the extreme that blanket tariffs are good, no taxes. And he's saying these things that are just empty promises and empty sayings just to relate to individuals and not really giving them that educated thing as you just expressed. And that's why I think we agree.
Just on that point though, right? You're not going to be able to sit down with a bunch of workers, manufacturing workers, and explain the finer points of economics to them. Not because they're dumb, because they've got qualifications on other things. I could never fix an engine. I wouldn't have a bloody clue. I'm going to call the automotive service to come out and change my tire because I wouldn't have a bloody clue what I'm doing, right? So they just have different talents, different experience, all the rest of it. But they feel like they're under pressure. Now, he goes to those communities and he talks to them and talks about bringing their jobs back. Whether or not some of his plans may not work out in the end, at least he's trying to do that. I think the Harris campaign has just come in and gone, she's a brat, she's vibing. What does that mean? What's your plan for the middle class? Well, I come from a middle class family, so what difference does it make? So, the point that I'm making is when she goes out there and she talks, you listen to things she talks about. She talks about trans issues, right? She talks about open immigration. She talks about all these other things, which I don't think the everyday person can relate to, and that's why you're hearing people who are not progressive all across the English-speaking Western world taking the same sort of position of like, what is with this woman? And also, somebody said earlier, I think it was Dan said, it's kind of cute, I guess, when she giggles and this and that. She's in her 60s. She's not 12.
So
I just turned 60 for another couple of months.
Well,
yeah, she turned 60 in a couple of months. I think she's 59 right now. But Shaquille, just really quickly, because we only got a few more minutes, and I'm going to try to end this show off of the phone and everything since the computers are acting crazy today, but that's neither here nor there. But Shaquille, one of the questions I was going to ask you really quickly, because you kind of alluded to it with the transgender care and kind of the prison system, but there have been a number of incidences where prisoners have not gotten the correct kind of medical care. Some people be like, they don't care because they're prisoners. What do they need medical care for and everything? So I just wonder, in your stance, what do you think about that? Because even here in North Carolina and Durham, to be exact, we've had prisoners that have literally lost their lives or that have been through protests because they did not get correct medical care. And sometimes they feel that is not going on in the prisons. And that's separate from the transgender, because I agree with what a lot of people said, that that's a minority, but people just need basic care and they don't get that sometimes in the prison. So what's your take on whether prisoners should have access to good medical care?
Of course they should. But you know what I think would be a more significant issue for Americans to talk about rather than the trans thing in prisons? From what I understand, if you have an addiction to something like an opioid addiction, heroin or something like that, and you get locked up, okay, they don't give you any treatment for it. And that, from what I've seen people, coming down off that, and because they've actually got an addiction, that what their body goes through, it's horrible, and they're not giving any kind of medication. They're not giving, what's the other thing they can take instead of it? So they're not being given any of that. Surely that would be a bigger issue, given the amount of drug addicts that you have just in sheer numbers. But nobody talks about it. So yes, if somebody who's already on some kind of trans care medication or whatever, of course they need to be, you have a duty of care to make sure that they continue with it. And you also have a duty of care to make sure that a very feminine looking male is not in general population, because prisons are violent places. But on the same token, you can't prioritize them over everybody else and everybody else's issues. I don't think that would be reasonable. Do you see alcoholics that go into prison being given Valium or anything else that treats alcohol addiction or any other type of drug addiction? You're not seeing that. Isn't that also unfair? Isn't that a more prevalent issue?
I think there are some programs like that, but I've not been in prison, but I've had friends that have been in that, and I think they do have programs for them if they are drug addicted or have alcohol addictions, even in the prison and everything. Because I think
They have them.
Joe, am I correct?
They have good services, but they don't often prescribe the medications to deal with it. I mean, there's a tablet, I just can't think of the name of it, but there's something that you can take which blocks the opioids they give to heroin addicts. I just can't remember the name of it.
Methadone? Are you talking about
methadone? That's it, methadone. I don't even think that they give methadone in prisons to prisoners who are, or even in jail. So when you first get locked up, so all of a sudden you're just coming down and you're craving it, and your body is detoxing and all that, and it's a horrific thing. But for somebody to go through, like, isn't that an issue?
Yeah. You tell me what you can say.
I think we all agree the prison system is screwed up because there's a lot of money in it. Two, we don't take care of the prisoners, and we don't worry about recidivism, and that's a problem. We don't actually try and give them psychologists, psychiatrists. It is actually slavery because we pay them a minimal on the dollar. We pay them like 13 cents to make a ton of different things. So it is a new form of slavery. There's actually a great documentary. There's some great writings about it. Honestly, Shaq, there are a couple of them I think you would be interested in watching, and I think you would find very fascinating, knowing how you are very intellectual on this subject. So I there's some things. Yeah. So either way, I think the issue comes into play because, truthfully, nobody is talking about the trans issues on the campaign trail from Kamala Harris or Tim Walz. A lot of people have put out, the Republican Party has put out what Kamala Harris said in a commercial ad that is running, and that was from 2019. So, it was 2019 when they were trying to run against Trump. That was old stuff. So nobody's really speaking about it now, and it is a hot button issue now, and it is smart politically for the GOP to push that issue right now because it speaks to their base and speaks to that fear base. And that is one of the things.
Not just a Republican base, though, Jacoby. I think that most people feel the same way about it. It's like Governor Newsom's. It's like Governor Newsom's, deep fake, ban or whatever it is he's trying to do. Again, most people don't want government to be the arbiter of what's true and what's not. And they also don't want government to step in and say, well, this is not true, so therefore you can't see it or read about it. Keir Starmer has done something similar in the UK. I actually think the Labor Party will end up getting rid of him, to be perfectly honest with you. I could be wrong. That's just my take on things, again, from afar and from talking to friends of mine in the UK. The Australian Prime Minister is talking about doing it. The Canadian Prime Minister has talked about doing it. And in each of these cases, the overwhelming majority of the people don't support government doing this. That these parties get into power, they say they're about democracy, they say they're about representing the collective will of the people. And what do? They get into power and then they try to push through things that they know the majority of people just simply don't support.
So just to push back on that as well, because
we've got to go to economics.
Yeah, we're right at the time.
Because it's not the majority. You cannot do always majority on moral things, because if we did that, then we wouldn't have the civil rights laws and so on and so forth. That's a whole nother topic that we can discuss later.
Let me just say this, right? If the three of us men here right now, and I come out there and I say clearly, I am the most good-looking and charming amongst the three of us, I don't want government to come in and work out whether I'm telling the truth or not, okay? I think we can all assess that for ourselves.
That's not the issue, though.
But it's all right.
It would be a big lie anyway.
You a damn